Episode 11. "Excellent," said Harry happily. "So, have you got all your new books and stuff?" "Look at this," said Ron, pulling a long, thin box out of a bag and opening it. "Brand new wand, 14 inches, willow, containing 1 unicorn tail hair. And we've got all our books." He pointed at a large bag under his chair. "What about those monster books, eh? The assistant nearly cried when we said we wanted 2. "What's all that, Hermione?" Harry asked, pointing at not 1 but 3 bulging bags in the chair next to her.
"Well, I'm taking more new subjects than you, aren't I?" said Hermione. "Those are my books for arithmancy, care of magical creatures, divination, the study of ancient runes, muggle studies." "What are you doing muggle studies for?" said Ron, rolling his eyes at Harry. "You're muggle-born. Your mum and dad are muggles. You already know all about muggles." "Oh, but it'll be fascinating to study them from the wizarding point of view," said Hermione earnestly.
"Are you planning to eat or sleep at all this year, Hermione?" asked Harry, while Ron snickered. Hermione ignored them.
"I've still got 10 galleons," she said, checking her purse. "It's my birthday in September, and Mum and Dad gave me some money to get myself an early birthday present." "How about a nice book?" said Ron innocently. "No, I don't think so," said Hermione composedly. "I really want an owl. I mean, Harry's got Hedwig and you've got Errol." "I haven't," said Ron. "Errol's a family owl. All I've got is Scabbers." He pulled his pet rat out of his pocket. "And I want to get him checked over," he added, placing Scabbers on the table in front of them. "I don't think Egypt agreed with him." Scabbers was looking thinner than usual, and there was a definite droop to his whiskers. "There's a magical creature shop just over there," said Harry, who knew Diagon Alley very well by now. "You could see if they've got anything for Scabbers, and Hermione can get her owl." So they paid for their ice cream and crossed the street to the magical menagerie. There wasn't much room inside. Every inch of wall was hidden by cages. It was smelly and very noisy because the occupants of these cages were all squeaking, squawking, jabbering, or hissing. The witch behind the counter was already advising a wizard on the care of double-ended newts, so Harry, Ron, and Hermione waited, examining the cages. A pair of enormous purple toads sat gulping wetly and feasting on dead blowflies. A gigantic tortoise with a jewel-encrusted shell was glittering near the window. Poisonous orange snails were oozing slowly up the side of their glass tank, and a fat white rabbit kept changing into a silk top hat and back again with a loud popping noise. Then there were cats of every color, a noisy cage of ravens, a basket of funny custard-colored furballs that were humming loudly, and on the counter a vast cage of sleek black rats that were playing some sort of skipping game using their long bald tails. The double-ended newt wizard left, and Ron approached the counter. "It's my rat," he told the witch. "He's been off colour ever since I brought him back from Egypt." "Bang him on the counter," said the witch, pulling a pair of heavy black spectacles out of her pocket. Ron lifted Scabbers out of his inside pocket and placed him next to the cage of his fellow rats, who stopped their skipping tricks and scuffled to the wire for a better look. Like nearly everything Ron owned, Scabbers the rat was second-hand. He had once belonged to Ron's brother Percy, and a bit battered. Next to the glossy rats in the cage, he looked especially woebegone. Said the witch, picking up Scabbers. "How old is this rat?" "Dunno," said Ron. "Quite old. He used to belong to my brother." "What powers does he have?" said the witch, examining Scabbers closely. The truth was that Scabbers had never shown the faintest trace of interesting powers.
The witch's eyes moved from Scabbers' tattered left ear to his front paw, which had a toe missing, and tutted loudly.
"He's been through the mill, this one," she said.
"He was like that when Percy gave him to me," said Ron defensively.
"An ordinary common or garden rat like this can't be expected to live longer than 3 years or so," said the witch. "Now, if you were looking for something a bit more hard-wearing, you might like one of these."
She indicated the black rats, who promptly started skipping again. Ron muttered, "Show-offs."
"Well, if you don't want a replacement, you can try this rat tonic," said the witch, reaching under the counter and bringing out a small red bottle.
"Okay," said Ron. "How much—"
"Ouch!"
Ron buckled as something huge and orange came soaring from the top of the highest cage, landed on his head, and then propelled itself, spitting madly, at Scabbers.
"No, Crookshanks, no!"
cried the witch, but Scabbers shot from between her hands like a bar of soap, landed splay-legged on the floor, then scampered for the door. "Scabbers!" Ron shouted, racing out of the shop after him. Harry followed. It took them nearly 10 minutes to catch Scabbers, who had taken refuge under a waste paper bin outside Quality Quidditch Supplies. Ron stuffed the trembling rat back into his pocket and straightened up, massaging his head.
"What was that?"
"It was either a very big cat or quite a small tiger," said Harry.
"Where's Hermione?"
"Probably getting her owl." They made their way back up the crowded street to the magical menagerie. As they reached it, Hermione came out, but she wasn't carrying an owl. Her arms were clamped tightly around the enormous ginger cat.
"You bought that monster?"
said Ron, his mouth hanging open.
"He's gorgeous, isn't he?" said Hermione,
glowing. That was a matter of opinion, thought Harry. The ginger cat's fur was thick and fluffy, but it was definitely a bit bow-legged, and its face looked grumpy and oddly squashed, as though it had run headlong into a brick wall. Now that Scabbers was out of sight, however, the cat was purring contentedly in Hermione's arms.
"Hermione, that thing nearly scalped me,"
said Ron.
"He didn't mean to, did you, Crookshanks?" said Hermione.
"And what about Scabbers?" said Ron, pointing at the lump in his chest pocket.
"He needs rest and relaxation. How's he going to get that with that thing around?" "That reminds me, you forgot your rat tonic," said Hermione, slapping the small red bottle into Ron's hand. "And stop worrying. Crookshanks will be sleeping in my dormitory and Scabbers in yours. What's the problem?" "Poor Crookshanks. That witch said he'd been in there for ages. No one wanted him."
"Wonder why," said Ron sarcastically as they set off toward the leaky cauldron. They found Mr. Weasley sitting in the bar, reading the Daily Prophet. "Harry," he said, smiling as he looked up, "how are you?"
"Fine, thanks," said Harry,
as he, Ron, and Hermione joined Mr. Weasley with their shopping. Mr. Weasley put down his paper, and Harry saw the now familiar picture of Sirius Black staring up at him. "They still haven't caught him, then?" he asked. "No," said Mr. Weasley, looking extremely grave. "They've pulled us all off our regular jobs at the Ministry to try and find him, but no luck so far."
"Will we get a reward if we caught him?" asked Ron. "It'd be good to get some more money."
"Don't be ridiculous, Ron," said Mr. Weasley, who, upon closer inspection, looked very strained. "Black's not going to be caught by a 13-year-old wizard. It's the Azkaban guards who'll get him back. You mark my words." At that moment, Mrs. Weasley entered the bar, laden with shopping bags and followed by the twins, Fred and George, who were about to start their 5th year at Hogwarts. The newly elected head boy, Percy, and the Weasleys' youngest child and only girl, Ginny. Ginny, who had always been very taken with Harry, seemed even more heartily embarrassed than usual when she saw him. Perhaps because he had saved her life during their previous year at Hogwarts. She went very red and muttered, "Hello," without looking at him. Percy, however, held out his hand solemnly, as though he and Harry had never met, and said, "Harry, how nice to see you."
"Hello, Percy," said Harry, trying not to laugh.
"I hope you're well," said Percy pompously, shaking hands. It was rather like being introduced to the mayor.
"Very well, thanks."
"Hooray!" said Fred, elbowing Percy out of the way and bowing deeply. "Simply splendid to see you, old boy." "Marvellous," said George, pushing Fred aside and seizing Harry's hand in turn. "Absolutely spiffing." Percy scowled.